Hey guys, Hailey Lain aka Key Black here, and welcome back to another episode of Off the Cuff, the second episode of 2024. Thank you guys so much for joining in. I hope you had a fantastic Christmas and New Year celebration, and we're gonna jump right back into it with Professor Layton. Fair warning, there are gonna be some spoilers in this video. If you guys aren't familiar with it, Professor Layton is a puzzle game series where you play as Professor Layton, a professor of archaeology at Gressenheller University, along with his little sidekick Luke Triton. Each game has like the mystery of the week, and you progress through the story by solving puzzles and brain teasers and stuff. It's a really cute series. I first discovered it back when I was playing Ace Attorney Ghost Trick for the first time. I was in the middle of loving Detective Conan, and I had just come off of reading a bunch of Sherlock Holmes books, so I was like, oh my god, yes, more detective stuff. What really caught my attention about the series to begin with was the style. I had never really seen anything that looked like that, certainly not in a video game context. You know, the professor himself, he's got these dot eyes, he kinda has a Tintin vibe to him. And I picked up the first game, of course, The Curious Village. It was a super whimsical, super fun, and light-hearted story. The animation was mega charming, the music was gorgeous. But admittedly, my favorite part of the game was the professor's voice. Christopher Robin Miller gives him this very deep, very charming, and very polite British accented character voice. So I'm sitting there looking at this dot-eyed cartoon character like, hello, Professor. But I fell in love with the series pretty rapidly, and I was like devouring each new game as it came out. I still remember when the Unwound Future was first announced to be, you know, brought over to the West. I was like looking up all the music, and I was trying to avoid spoilers, but also kind of dancing around them like, ooh, do I want to know what's going on in the plot line? I did end up spoiling myself about the ending to that game. I found the ending cutscene in Japanese, you know, didn't understand a lick of what was going on, but managed to make myself cry without any context about why Luke was leaving. When that game was finally released in the West, I think I burned through it over the course of a single weekend. I drew a whole bunch of fan art for it back in the day, but I think it's all been lost to the ether at this point, except for like a couple of drawings I've posted on Tumblr here and there. Then the movie came out, and then the prequel trilogy came out, and I wasn't really as fond of those as I was of the first trilogy, and in hindsight I can kind of see why, you know, I think it kind of jumped the shark. Long Lost Dead Girlfriend, I can dig that. It kind of wraps up its own plot, but you throw in the long lost brother along with that, and it's like, how many tragic backstories does Professor Layton have? Prior to all the, you know, who is Professor Layton questions being answered in the game, it was kind of a running gag that Layton himself was more of a force of nature than he was a character. There would be these fourth wall breaks in the games where one of the mechanics is you find hint coins in the environment by tapping on things in the image that's, you know, presented as the background. Well, sometimes you can find hint coins on the moon, which of course begs the question of how the hell did Layton get up there? Well, of course he just did a perfect vertical leap from Earth to the moon and back. I remember a lot of those jokes kind of went by the wayside though by the time he took his hat off in the third game, and it was like, oh, okay, so that kind of feels like the nice cap, you know, pun intended, on his character. Like, that's it, that's the ending of Professor Layton. I mentioned I'm not a huge fan of the prequel trilogy or of the Eternal Diva, but I do have a soft spot for Jean Descalais, which I kind of attribute him as my first exposure to the Liquid Snake kind of character long before I played the Metal Gear series. It's funny, he kind of had a similar energy to Layton in that, like, if you take Layton as a cryptid, Jean Descalais is also kind of a cryptid. You kind of don't want the answers about them. You just want Descalais to appear, do whatever he's gonna do to screw up with the plot, and then just run off laughing maniacally. And that was precisely what he did for, I think, 2 of the prequel games as well as the movie. I did not see it coming that he would die in Professor Layton's arms and turn out to be the original Herschel Layton. If nothing else, the prequel trilogy is a gold mine for memes. But you know, it's pretty easy to rag on the series and on the Layton character himself. Apparently he was designed as a Phoenix Wright without the character flaws. But it really was a really charming game series. I still really adore it. I'm very curious about this game that's coming out, the steampunk kind of setting one. I don't really know anything about it. I just saw like an image for it advertising the game like, you know, 2 weeks ago. And it has been a really long time since I last dove back into the games. I have super fond memories of them, playing them over the summer and like, you know, over holiday breaks and things. If you guys are into puzzle games and you haven't played the Professor Layton series, I do recommend the first game as a very lighthearted, fun romp. The rest of the series is entirely dependent on how deeply you want to go into the who is Professor Layton rabbit hole. But the whole series has just absolutely gorgeous artwork and absolutely gorgeous music that I keep coming back to long after I last played the last game. But I think that is a good place to cap it off, guys. Thanks so much again for listening and for watching. Once again, Happy New Year, and I will see you guys in the next episode of Off the Cuff.